Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the 1 Million by 1 Million podcast. And today's podcast is part of our Thought Leaders in Corporate Innovation series. We have as our guest today John Deschner from TBWA Chiat. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So, as an introduction, tell us a bit about what is your focus, philosophy, or overall thinking at Chiat these days, vis-a-vis innovation?
Well, I have an interesting role that was purposefully designed to be both an innovation role and sort of a more central traditional role in the agency. So I'm both the Chief Innovation Officer and the Managing Director. And I think, for most large creative agencies, the focus for us on innovation is really a focus on transformation. And I think, a lot of it is a struggle to stay useful and relevant and a couple of steps ahead of our clients' needs and the best ways to utilize the platforms and media channels that have really exploded over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So can you isolate the different trends that you are seeing in your industry, in the advertising industry, that you need to be particularly mindful about and that you need strategies around?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny. There are a lot of trends. I think mostly they're pulling in the same direction. There are some that are sort of offsetting. I think the biggest trend for people who care about consumers' attention is that consumers' attention is much more fractured and has been getting so since 1998 or so when we all started getting dial-up lines. So I think, and then obviously exploded with the introduction of the iPhone. So I think that's the biggest trend. And again, we haven't seen a slowing. We haven't, people seem to continually add media time to their day without necessarily subtracting from too many other platforms. And what that tells us is that they're probably doing two or three things simultaneously. So that's a huge trend for us. And it just means we have to, we used to have the luxury, sort of well-trod territory, we used to have the luxury of, in the middle of the show that we could reliably say 35 million people are going to watch, we got 30 seconds with you. And unless you, took a bathroom break, we were pretty sure we had some legitimate percentage of your attention. And now, no serialized show and even very few live events pull that kind of consistent viewing. And the truth is, too, that the moment there's something that people are slightly less interested in or a momentary thought hits them, they have at least one, if not two other screens they can turn to. Sometimes that's supplementary interaction. Sometimes it's, sort of purely interruptive. But I think that's something that companies who are used to making big, iconic, coherent, creative statements are still adjusting to. The fact that we probably don't get 30 uninterrupted seconds. We have to pull, 5 interactions in 6-second intervals or maybe 30 in 1-second intervals. So and that means that our strategy and our creative output has to be fundamentally different and that we have to be much, much smarter about the media landscape. The things that we would do on Snapchat are fundamentally different than the things that we would do, even to be fair, on Instagram. So so that's a significant trend. That just means we have to be better at a broader spectrum of things, and we have to be comfortable with triangulating people as opposed to just consistently getting a chunk of their attention. And then beyond that, I think what that's driven in our industry is that, I think even when I got into advertising 15 years ago, there were a bunch of big agencies, but it was a pretty reliable list. And then there were some upstarts like AKQA and RGA and Organic who were pushing in. And now there are, especially in Los Angeles where I am, there are hundreds and thousands of possibilities for a brand. And they're sampling a lot of them, which for us translates into some really interesting opportunities, but also generally translates into less money. So we have to adjust to that. We have to be better at more things at the same time, but with less, fewer overall client dollars pushed our way. Yeah,
interesting. So I'm going to double click down on both of those vectors individually. The first question that came to my mind is the fragmentation of media attention question. While there is fragmentation, there is also a couple of channels that are hogging attention from a platform point of view, right? Facebook continues to, be a very big attention hog globally. And, there's some other, you have a much better organized list of who's hogging what attention than I do. How do you see this playing out? And there is a lot of clamor right now about, addictive behavior and so forth. So how do you see this playing out?
Yeah. Well, so two things. First, I think the stat that, Google and Facebook together pull 60% of all digital media dollars, while I think it's true, Facebook doesn't really mean Facebook. Facebook means lots of different types of ad units. It means Messenger. It means WhatsApp. It means Instagram. So that all gets sort of lumped together. But really, you're talking about, at least 3 or 4 fundamentally different behaviors in different places. And even too, Facebook Live, while it still exists under a blue bar, also is a fundamentally different way of interacting. So I think that there's the duopoly is more of a financial entity than it is like a consumer behavioral entity. Even, especially Google, everything from Daydream, VR, all the way through to like the 50 different kinds of YouTube units you can play with. And then through to like paid search, which even there's a lot of interesting innovation in paid search. So I think that again, from if I'm a brand, I certainly have concerns about that because being in a duopoly situation tends to be anti-competitive. From a financial perspective, but as an advertiser or marketer, I think it's still a pretty broad spectrum of behaviors. So there's that side. I also, I think it's been a really interesting last couple of months, especially like before I came back to Los Angeles last year, I was in Southeast Asia for a couple of years, and in Myanmar especially, they switched on the internet, and all of a sudden 3G cards were $1.50 a month instead of $1,500 a month. And Facebook became synonymous with the internet for that country effectively, and then got turned to some really nefarious purposes. There was, and I think again, it makes what happened in the U.S. election here look exceptionally mild by comparison, because this resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. And I think that was a microcosm for me of what we're seeing now. Like there's this sense of maybe, again, you have people from these platforms saying maybe the thing we made, we should have thought harder about. Like we essentially, we created the digital version of a cigarette and we never thought about what it might do when we put it out in the world and then weaponized it. And so I think that seeing what the announcements that YouTube's making around human curation of a lot of its content, especially its premium content, Facebook announcing that they're going to try to fundamentally change the news feed. At least there's an acknowledgement. I think underlying all of that, there's a guy called Dan Hahn who's at least an order of magnitude smarter than I am, who's basically said, when we see these things like the election, like what's happening with, Facebook Live in North Africa, what's happening in Myanmar, that's what happens right before you get regulated software development, which I think would fundamentally change, especially Silicon Valley, to some degree LA. Like I think you'd see a lot fewer Teslas and a lot more curl as if that happened in 10 years,
Yeah. So all of those are very interesting developments, macro trends, and we are tracking all of them very closely. And I agree with you. There's going to be regulation, and there needs to be regulation. I don't think there's any two ways about it.
The question though is it government regulation or self-regulation?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. If they don't self-regulate, government will regulate, and if they self-regulate, it may be done in a more intelligent way. Government regulation can be very not intelligent.
Potentially. Like I'm not a person who believes that all government regulation is bad, certainly, but I think there's. You look at like what happened with the motion picture industry sort of earlier on in its lifetime, and I think and the video game industry did the same thing. Now that was just content, which is a lot simpler. But I think both of those industries sort of successfully reassured the public and the government and world governments that they had a handle on it and they understood their responsibility. And I think the onus is now on not just Facebook and Google, but sort of broader speaking these platforms, including smartphone manufacturers, to prove that they understand that there's a balance between profit and their impact in the world.
Yes, totally. So, coming back to the micro, to your organization, I want to probe two topics. One is your internal innovation strategy. One is your external innovation strategy. So let's start with internal innovation, and I'm going to explain to you what I'm looking to understand based on what you've said so far. So there is all this stuff going on. There are different platforms, there are different ad units even within the platforms, different types of ways you can engage with the audience with different attention spans and so forth. So there's a tremendous opportunity for creativity and innovation, and using technology and designing creatives or designing, interactive programs within your technology constraints within your organization. How do you keep track of all the different things that are happening and which ones need to be kind of institutionalized? If you hit upon something, what we do in the technology industry often is like if something happens in some part of the organization and it looks really interesting, it goes from being a side experiment to becoming institutionalized somehow and often productized. Your business is a bit different, but certainly institutionalization opportunities are bound within your organization as well, I imagine. How do you manage that process-wise?
Yeah, well, I think there's a more fundamental question, which is, do you have the people with the curiosity and at least the beginnings of the expertise to be able to execute something like that effectively, whatever that is, a new ad unit, playing in a new channel. And then above that is do you have a way to purposefully experiment? And then if it works, begin to institutionalize it. And if it doesn't work, walk away with some lesson as to like what you messed up or what didn't function. So from that standpoint, I think, I'd say like at a core, internal innovation in a services industry is a lot about transformation. Whether that's the same people with new skills, new people, or new frameworks that you can put the same skills into but get a different outcome. So there's that side of it. Like really simply in terms of staying on top of the different platforms and units and behaviors that are occurring in those platforms. The secret weapon, I think, for creative agencies is that the platforms, Google and Facebook especially, but also Snapchat, they all, have a staggering amount of money compared to ad agencies. And B, they're dying to have us create into their products. Having media agencies, buy an opportunity is great, but if you don't have a strategy or an idea that fits it, you end up with some weird bolt-on and generally, not terribly interesting results, and then you never do it again. So I think a few years ago, had some really interesting opportunities with Target, and we were talking about something being, all YouTube. What if we moved this campaign to 100% YouTube in terms of the core assets? And we found by reaching out to Google, they were super excited to support us, help us sell it in, even help fund things sometimes. So that's kind of my standard drill. Like with there's a new, so I'm routinely meeting with people from YouTube and other parts of Google, Facebook, Instagram, Whisper, Snap. When I go to South by Southwest, I sort of, have a breakfast taco, go do 75 meetings with interesting platforms, and then, go have drinks at like 9 o'clock at night. So it's really about just, I think if you let those people in and let them help you craft your strategies and ideas, you can get a huge amount of value out of them. We actually just did something with YouTube, a 6-second stories exercise that they actually funded with a bunch of creative agencies. And then it gave us an opportunity to debut some stuff at Sundance, and then there's going to be a South by Southwest extension. So the nice thing about that is we get to play in a medium. We get to play with some new tools and things in beta, but we're not doing it with client dollars. We're doing it with our own sort of time and creative energy. So our people get a chance to kind of be famous in their own right and do something, for South by or Sundance. And we get a chance to develop some new expertise in a really low risk environment. So that's really it. I found having, the more you have an open door for the platforms, the more value you get out of them. And I think they're really happy to come in and, teach us anything, support us, give us hardware, software, expertise. So that's how we stay on top of those things, is just by having a really open door. And also too, my CCO here is great about pushing creatives to say like, okay, do whatever you're going to do, but I also want to see an idea using, director mix. I want to see an idea using Facebook Live.
Mm-hmm. So you use all the platform vendors to be kind of educating you on what's new on their platform and what are the possibilities and the powers of those platforms, and then you bring that into your creatives and task them to come up with creative ideas on how to use those platforms and those types of constraints.
Yeah, well, all the platforms do. Yeah, all the platforms do road shows, and the road show is a great way just to get a basic understanding. But again, I think what I used to do when I was at an agency called Deutsch in LA, and what I've continued to do here, is to really invite them in. So we have somebody from Google who sits in our office one day a week. We have a really close partnership with Reddit. We have a preferred data partnership with LinkedIn. And all those things just give us ways to exploit those platforms that we otherwise wouldn't have if we just, just used what was publicly available or
right.
To that point too, like fast following something that worked before. Like once Geico did the unskippable ad, every other unskippable execution, while it may have been incrementally more effective, was sort of creatively and from a brand perspective a lot less effective.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you also mentioned that even just in LA, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of boutique agencies nowadays that are competing for the same dollars, and the brands and are becoming much more open to experimenting and spreading the dollars across those different smaller agencies. How do you keep track? What's your process of keeping an eye on who's doing what and what's interesting and what's succeeding?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's funny, the award shows used to be the sort of best place. Like if you went to Cannes, you saw the best marketing and advertising in the world, and you could reliably say like, okay, if somebody made a dent there, even just had like an interesting little splash you never heard of before, you should probably keep your eye on them. And I think now that's a much less reliable way, just because there are a lot of small and medium players who are doing interesting stuff. I don't know, it's funny. I mean, there's obviously, having been in the industry for a while, I have a lot of friends around the industry, and we all kind of watch and share things. So there's that kind of dark social version of, other chief digital officers, CIOs, CSOs, and we just share stuff around. It's like, man, that's pretty cool. Like, what do we think it means? And then beyond that, I mean, I think I'd say especially in LA, there's a great community now. There are a lot of events. Again, some of them organized just because we have obviously a big Facebook presence and big Google presence here. They organize a lot of events that bring us together. And that too kind of helps you keep track. And then the other side is honestly just recruiting. We're always looking for the next smart, interesting person from a background that's not exactly like, anybody else we have here or the majority of people we have here. So recruiting is funny when when people start spiking in recruiting searches, then maybe you track that back and take a look at the agency that they're out of, or even not an agency, and just say, like that's pretty wild. So those two ways I think kind of help keep us pointed at who's doing interesting things. I think too, the other piece I'd say is, that a lot of times it's not, within the big agency world especially, you kind of need to know 50 or 100 people, and you've got sort of a handle on most of the world you need to. I think for us it's looking beyond that, whether it's like there's a platform called Influential that's sort of AI-driven.
Yes,
AI-driven influencer selection. Yeah, and so it's more. I think that's it. Like again, part of my job is just meeting me, especially my head of digital production, my head of digital and content strategy. We meet with just about anybody that calls us up, just to understand what they're up to and what the opportunities are, and then there you never know. Again, we're always open to a partnership. Like for instance, we're doing a pitch. And as a pitch, we're partnering with Super Deluxe. We haven't worked together before. They have an amazing handle on Facebook Live and how to exploit it. So we're actually, and in a very transparent way, like we're not white labeling them. We're pitching together, and what we're pitching, has strategy, creative, execution, production, and distribution built into it. So those sorts of exercises, I think, help keep us, a little more fresh.
Great. Very interesting. And influencers, you brought up influencers. What is your, how do you keep track of the influencers that you want to work with and so forth? Is there do you use a system like there are actually many of these influencer marketing systems out there. Is that what you use?
I mean, I think so. If you're talking about, tier one influencers now are essentially the same as working with any celebrity. Especially, that you see certain amount of
true, actually,
brand and creative control. Yeah, I I couldn't tell you the difference between working with, again, like any top tier influencer and working with a celebrity. So right. Those aren't really hard to track, right?
That is true, yeah.
There are big numbers that will tell you if their audience crosses over with yours. And then you just, handle all the normal details. I think when you get down to like tier 2 and tier 3 influencers, those more data-driven platforms become really interesting. And there, to me, it's not so much about tracking influencers as it is about trying to cast a reasonably wide net. And then, because if you're going to take $20,000 or $30,000 and spread it around through a tier 2 or tier 3 influencer program, where really, it's incentivized content creation, you just see which one of them spikes and creates the most noise, and then think about essentially using them. It's sort of like the old brand ambassador programs. You're just finding them through more of a data-driven way. So yeah. I mean, that said, though, I think that influencer ecosystem is a little, I think there are a lot of people who are sort of right in the bubble of being a tier 1 influencer who really, they're challenged to brand things because as soon as they do, they dump 5% of their audience that they have to go, scrape to get back. And the money really doesn't make a ton of sense for them. So I do think there's going to be those people who are, especially if I look at like YouTube, they're right around that 300,000, 400,000 subscriber mark. I feel like there's an opportunity there that you might get like a really big bang for your buck, but without having to cost them, 5% of their audience or looking like a shill. We haven't cracked that yet, but I do. I think there's an opportunity. I'm having some really interesting talks with professional gamers in that space, like sort of the esports e-league space. And I think they're like, we'll be able to try some different things. I mean, a lot of these things do just come down to being open to, experimentation at a financial level. If we say like, listen, maybe the money doesn't move like this, maybe it moves like this, or maybe we do something more long-term. And I think
the incentive structure.
And if you're open to that, if you're open to coming up with 5 options instead of the usual 1 or 2, I think you can get some more interesting things done.
Yeah. Very good. Very interesting conversation. Thank you for participating, John. And it's, we definitely look at the world from the technology industry's point of view, and you are more users and consumers and customers of technology as opposed to the actual technology vendors. So it's very helpful for our audience of people who are experimenting with ad tech and platforms to hear a different point of view. So thank you for sharing. Audience, thank you for coming today and listening to this show. We will continue bringing you interesting thought leaders in corporate innovation as well, alongside all our other types of interviews that you're hearing in these podcasts, investor interviews as well as entrepreneur interviews. And stop by at the mentoring sessions, the weekly free mentoring sessions from 1Mby1M anytime. It's a working session. You can bring your business and we'll work on it together. Thank you for coming again. See you soon at another episode of the podcast.